it's not every day you see a new platform that could open up an entirely new industry of applications. This one is going to be a little geeky. We're going to talk about developer technology, but this thing from Firebase lets you build a new kind of app without knowing a lot about real-time databases or infrastructure or all the stuff that all the Twitter guys had to deal with over the last 6 years. Really fun, Firebase. Who are you?
I'm James Tamplin. I'm the founder and CEO of Firebase. I grew up in England, but met Andrew here in high school in Minnesota. I went to the University of Wisconsin and studied industrial and systems engineering. And I've been out in California for about 3.5 years working on startups.
Cool.
Great. And let me reframe. Get Andrew in there.
Your eyes. And who are you?
I'm Andrew Lee. I'm also a founder of Firebase and the CTO. I grew up in Minnesota. That's where I met James, went to school in Indiana, moved out here to California about 5 years ago, and been working in startups ever since.
Very cool. Well, you guys showed me something pretty mind-blowing, this real-time platform. For the non-developers, and we'll get geeky in a minute, what does it do at a high level so people, when they hear that it was built in Firebase or something like that, they know what you guys do?
Yeah, so Firebase is a scalable real-time backend. And what that means in layman's terms is it's like Dropbox, but for your application's data. So it really lets you build great real-time apps without knowing anything about the backend.
And so tell me a little bit about what you think the first developers are going to try to do with this. Is this going to be a way to build a new kind of Zynga game where we can play games side by side with each other while we're around the world? Or?
Yeah, so we've had about 100 beta testers using the product right now and about 30 apps. And the initial apps that we've seen are very much focused around collaboration and gaming. So we've had Tetris, MMO Asteroids, we've had a collaborative whiteboard built. So a lot of real-time and collaborative apps. But really with Firebase, you can build anything. So any cloud application, you can build on top of us. So the sky really is the limit.
And so why, could we build Twitter in this or Facebook or something like that? Because those are sort of real time. They're not real time. I don't need to see that you're typing on the screen at the same time I'm looking at. But give me a little bit more sense of what this is really going to be useful for building.
Absolutely. So Facebook's newsfeed, for example, as soon as I comment on your post or I like something, every single user who's interacting with that is notified instantly. Yeah. So that's one example of how Facebook uses real time. They also have messages and chat, which are both real time, but they're integrated. And those type of integrated experiences are really easy to build on top of Firebase. And same with Twitter. You could most certainly build Twitter on top of Firebase.
Wow. How about something like Waze? I use Waze on my iPhone for when I'm in traffic and I see everybody else around me in real time, hundreds or even thousands of people all gathered on my screen in real time. Could I do something like that on it?
Absolutely. So Firebase basically stores data and syncs it to every other user. So for example, if you're driving down the highway looking at Waze, Firebase will continually track where you are and save that data. And in the act of saving it, it'll sync it out to everybody else who's using Waze. So the Waze developers would no longer have to think about the transmission or the data storage. All they would do is say, hey, I'm here, save that to Firebase, and their app just works.
Now there's a piece of this, in the old world to do this, I would have to build a stack of machines in a data center somewhere, and then I'd have to write a lot of code to do all this syncing of data from client A to client B to client C. Right? That's the old world of trying to build real-time apps like this? Like ICQ was built in '96, and they had a data center, and they had a lot of code that sort of synced up all these messages.
Yeah, so this technology has been built over and over again by the big players. Facebook and Twitter and Google have all built their own systems to do this, and we're trying to build a generic system that anybody can use to build their app, and they can have the same level of functionality that someone like Google does right out of the box.
Yeah, where I was going with this is the data center got converted into cloud computing. I mean, Rackspace Cloud, you can start up 20 servers, and now you have a virtual equivalent of that data center on your iPad, for instance, right? You guys are going even further where you don't even think about starting up a server, you just call an API, right?
So the administration of servers is actually a barrier to entry to a lot of people, and there are a lot of developers out there that they know how to write CSS and HTML and JavaScript, but they don't know anything about Unix administration. And they might not be able to build their app because they're missing that key team member. And we let all of those people build full-fledged apps without having to get that other team member to do their back end and learn how to manage Linux and that sort of thing.
So, and this is why it's playing with my mind, because this is a paradigm shift again, right? It's another time in our industry where we can see a paradigm shift right in front of us, right? What skill, or what does the developer need to know about you guys now to build this new style of real-time app?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There's this sort of overarching trend which is towards a thick client. There are more and more JavaScript applications and libraries being written every day. You'll go to Hacker News and you'll see a couple of new ones up there. And so because of this thick client, experience has gotten much more rich, and the need for real time has gotten a lot bigger. So we're focusing on just the developer building out that thick client, and we'll take care of the back. So we provide an API that has two core functionalities. One is storing data, and two is listening for updates when data changes. So when I'm building my app, all I need to do is I say, hey, Firebase, save this data, and then I can attach a callback, which is basically just a function, a piece of code that gets run when data changes. And then when that function gets hit, I just update my GUI, my thick client.
So if I'm building the next iteration of Waze, I just say, I'm here, so the GPS location of where I am, store that into the system, and then listen for all the other friends of mine or people who are using Waze on the road and display those. Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay. Can we take a look at an example that you guys have built and sort of understand more of what the system looks like and what it can empower?
Sure.
Yeah.
You want to draw?
Yeah, so I'll show you a quick example here. This is an example of a real-time drawing application.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull this up in two browser windows.
Yep.
And you're going to see there's a drawing already here. That was loaded out of our database on the back end and pushed to the client. And whenever I make any changes to one of these images, those changes will propagate over to the other side. So I can click here and I can draw on the page, and you'll see in real time everything is synchronized.
And so you're sending that up to the servers, and those changes, the mouse over or the changes that you're doing on screen, are being stored in real time up on your service, and then redisplayed or re-downloaded and redisplayed on your.
Yes, all of these
client.
changes are being written to disk on our servers in the cloud, and all of this, I believe, is right now going through our servers in Chicago.
How scalable is this? If I had 100,000 users all at one time trying to update that picture, which would be a messy UI, let's put it that way, but could I have it scale it at that kind of level?
So
or is there like a limitation of numbers of clients that could affect one screen, for instance?
So we consider ourselves to be a NoSQL database. And kind of the trend with NoSQL is people figured out that there are certain types of operations that are very difficult to scale. And so they designed special databases like Mongo that only allow you to do things that scale well. And we took the same sort of approach when we designed our API. We only allow you to do things that scale well. So the API has been designed from the ground up to scale linearly with size.
So I could build an app like a Google Earth, but I could put everybody on the Earth on that virtual Earth, and I could watch you move around with your iPhone and stuff like that. And it would scale to that kind of level.
That's the idea.
I'm trying to find out where the edges of this are, and what kind of mind-blowing things can be built on top of your system.
So one of the things that we think is really interesting is that consumers are used to their products scaling infinitely. When people are on Twitter and they hit 1,000 Twitter followers, they expect that they can add 1,001 and 1,002, and that's not strange to them. But developers have this experience where they build their app for one server, and when they hit the limits of what that one server can do, they have to re-engineer everything to shard across multiple servers. And we think that's a little silly. So our API is designed to work the same whether you have a tiny app that you just started or the next Google Earth.
Wow. Okay. What are you guys seeing when somebody changes something on the screen? Do you have a demo of that? I think you had a Tetris demo or something that sort of shows what actually happens in your database and what the APIs are doing and how you talk to the APIs and how you debug an app like this?
Yes, absolutely. This is a simple game of Tetris. We actually wrote a single-player game of Tetris and then made it multiplayer by synchronizing the state of the board between people's computers.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of how easy it is to build a real-time game just using this data synchronization approach. On the right-hand side of the screen here, we have a real-time debugger that shows all the data that you have in Firebase and what it looks like behind the scenes. And so you can see the actual rows when a piece over here drops. You can see that the row is inserted into this object. You can see it'll highlight in green as it changes. You can also see that the position of the falling piece updates. It shows the position and shows the piece number and these types of things. And it's being rendered here in the browser on the left, and on the right you actually see the data behind it.
And so the difference between us and every other real-time message passing service is we persist the data. So if Andrew refreshes that game of Tetris, then everything is still there. It pulls it all back out of Firebase and continues updating it in real time.
Wow. What kind of code do I write to
Just
make
JavaScript. If you've done Codecademy, you can do Firebase.
So it's just JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you have lots of facts on how to do it and what APIs are there and what they do and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of really good documentation. We put a lot of work. That's been our priority is on documentation. We know pretty well that developers need to understand and get comfortable with it. So yeah, all you need to know is JavaScript. We walk you through it. We've got several great tutorials on our website, which is firebase.com. You hit that, and the big button on the homepage will walk you right through how to build a sample app. And it'll take you about 5 minutes to build a fully scalable chat app.
Now, how do you guys get paid? Do I pay you per user? What's the business model?
Gotcha. So we're launching. Probably will have launched by the time this comes out. But we are going to be free for our beta testers. We're letting people into the beta, trickling them in as we handle capacity. But we'll start charging a little ways down the road, and we'll charge by a usage-based model. Yep. So it'll be a combination of probably gigabytes and API calls, but we're working on that at the moment.
Yeah. Now, if I'm building a mobile app, and a lot of this stuff is going to be mobile because that's sort of where we play, draw something or all these Zynga games, right? This is where the world is moving. Sometimes the Wi-Fi goes away, or sometimes our wireless goes away. How does it handle when the connectivity is inconsistent?
This is actually one of the really cool things you can do if you're using an API rather than some custom server code that you wrote. That API can actually do that logic for you, which is actually very complicated to figure out how to handle offline mode. And we actually enable you to write your application once and then have the data layer figure out when you're offline, figure out when you get connectivity back, and resynchronize all that data. So you can build your app as you normally would, and it'll automatically work in offline mode. So in the case of this drawing example, if you went through a tunnel on your phone and you drew on that picture when you were in the tunnel, when you come out of that tunnel, all of your changes will get pushed onto that picture, and you'll receive updates of everything everyone else has done in that time period.
Wow.
Without any changes to the code.
What kind of mistakes or what kind of mind shifts do you find developers are having to make when they use Firebase? Or are you seeing people struggle with it at all in places? Or?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge right now is people are used to a request response type model. They're used to a REST API where they ask for data and then they get it back. And we actually have a very different approach where you, at the beginning of your application, when it first starts up, you tell us, this is the data I want to know about updates on. And then we stream those updates to you as they occur. And it's a different approach to building software. It's actually a more efficient approach, but it's a big change.
And so you're streaming data, almost like the Firehose feed off of Twitter to my client.
Exactly, but just the data that you've specified that you'd like to see.
How many streams can I be receiving then?
Depends on your internet connection, basically. So
Okay.
a consumer app would probably want to limit to only a small amount of data, but if you're running a server, you could potentially have quite a big fire hose of updates.
Wow. And what kind of metadata do you have about those streams? Because like Twitter is storing each tweet twice, once for the tweet and then once for the logs that are generated for whether somebody read that or
So we do some of our own monitoring just to make sure the service stays up, but much of the logging for analytics and that sort of thing is left up to the developer. They can determine what types of things they want to save off, usage, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, if I'm building a real-time shoot 'em up game, I'd probably want to warn the user when their network is sort of wonky, right? Because you're at a disadvantage to the other players who have really nice network connections,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so you want to sort of say, hey, your network's going down, and you're gonna get beat because you're just not able to talk to the server, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a streaming world now. What else does that let you do as a developer? What kinds of how does that open your mind up to new possibilities now that you can get data streaming down to us from Firebase?
So I think we're moving into a very interesting world, and it's kind of the Internet of Things is kind of unfolding before our eyes, where not only do people have access to the web, but your kitchen fridge is going to be able to send a notification to you when you need more eggs, or there's an infinite number of devices that can now post updates. And those updates all, can happen in real time, and Firebase is built perfectly to deal with that paradigm.
Does the developer have to write notifications to go to different places? Like, if something happens in the world that I need to know about right now, maybe the developer would want to send an email or an SMS or go to my Apple's notification. Is that stuff that you do, or is that stuff that the developer has to take data out of the stream and say something happened that the user needs to know about, and then I'm going to do the notification tree on the client side?
So that's typically something that another API would handle for you. If you want to get a notification when somebody tweets something, there's going to be a whole ecosystem of these real-time updates, and Firebase can sit in the middle of those and kind of be the arbiter of those updates.
Can I have multiple Firebase databases? So if something's going on app A, can it shove data into app B?
Sure.
And sort of have a bridge into another database?
So one of the things we're doing that we think is really exciting is we're making the data extremely accessible by having a URL that's a unique identifier for every piece of data. So if you want to see your data live, all you do is you punch in a browser, firebase.com/your app, and you see your data. And you can actually address every number, every Boolean, every string that's stored in Firebase with its own URL. So if you want to share data with somebody else, all you need to know is the URL where that data is stored, and you can write to it, and you can listen for updates if you have permissions to do that.
That's mind-blowing. So every piece of data you can get to from any web browser.
Right, and we let you do 3 things with that URL. The first thing is we actually let you use it in the application code. So if you look in the JavaScript of a Firebase client, what you're going to see is a bunch of URLs that show what data they care about. The second thing you can do is you can actually punch that into a browser, and you can see a real-time view of that data if you have permissions.
And that's what we're seeing this.
That's what you're
check this
seeing
out.
here. You're seeing the live updating. And the third thing you can do is you can use as a REST API endpoint. So for developers that might have legacy systems or who are more comfortable with the REST approach, they can use it in a very traditional sort of way.
If I am building a company that relies on Twitter data, for instance, the Firehose data, and there's lots of companies now like DataSift that take the Firehose feed and shove it into their own systems. Can I shove Twitter data into this database and have it duplicated, I guess?
Yes, so we've actually done that. One of our developers actually built a Twitter and Instagram feed, so we combined data from a couple of these different social networks into one live feed, and we used that at the Angel Hack Hackathon about a month ago. And it took him just a couple hours to put together.
So you can do most of what the Node.js programmers in the next room are doing, but without knowing a lot of Node.js and not having to set up a whole set of infrastructure. Is that correct?
The feature set is very similar. Node is great for doing real-time updating, and it's great for developers who know JavaScript. And we also are good for real-time infrastructure as well as for JavaScript developers. But we integrate with Node. So for people who want to run their own servers, we have a Node client, and you can run your own servers to update your Firebase data as well.
Right. So Rackspace, Rackspace Cloud is doing all sorts of real-time reporting about your infrastructure. Could you shove that data in here?
Yes, absolutely.
And now you could build another dashboard that does something in real time.
Right, and your customers could access that raw data. So if they want to see updates about Rackspace status, they could subscribe and receive these updates about uptime and ping time and that sort of thing.
Back to the business model. How are you guys going to charge for this? When you do you have a price yet? And are you going to charge per gigabyte or per bandwidth? What are you guys thinking of in terms of what this will actually cost to build a company?
We don't have numbers to share yet. It'll be usage-based pricing. And we'll make sure to give all of our beta testers plenty of notice before we start charging. But right now it's free while in beta.
Yeah, it's really cool. Can you, when you do the pricing, if you could tell me what a line of code will cost me, that would be. It's like this stream, if it goes nuts, is going to cost X to produce. So you might think about that feature a little bit more.
We've had a pretty heavy focus on customer development and making sure people love the product, and we want to give the business model the due diligence it deserves before we force anything on people.
On the business, what are the fundamentals of the company? How is this funded, and how did this company come about?
Yeah, so Andrew and I, as mentioned earlier, have been working together for 3.5 years now, and this is our third company. So this company actually grew out of another product called Involve, which is chat software. It's like Facebook chat, but for any website. It's currently on 70,000 websites. And we went through Y Combinator last summer, and kind of during that summer, we were talking to our customers and figuring out where we were going to take the business going forward. And it turns out that our customers wanted to do way more with real-time than just our chat.
Yeah.
Our gaming customers wanted to send game data through the chat, and they wanted knobs and whistles, and it just wasn't customizable enough. Yeah. So Firebase grew out of that need, and we kind of, we took this chat, we dropped it down to give an API access to the infrastructure that we built for Involve.
It's crazy. You can see just from my questions, and I'm not even a developer, how this opens up a new style of app that uses Instagram, Twitter, all this real-time data and build new style of apps that go way beyond what Highlight can even do, right? It's really remarkable what you guys have built. Where do I learn more about it?
You can learn more at firebase.com.
Yeah.
Go there, take the tutorial, drop your email, and we'd love to get you started building apps on Firebase.
Very cool. Thanks for coming out and showing it to me. It's not every day I get to see something that's going to be a world changer.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert.
Awesome. Thanks.